There we go.
Got it. Yeah, right before I turned 32, like the month before. So I was diagnosed in August, but didn't have insurance, so I didn't get any, and my treatment didn't start until October. So October is always a really heavy month. I had, early stage, but very quickly growing IDC, and yeah.
Is that intraductal carcinoma?
Yeah, invasive ductal carcinoma, which is the most common.
Invasive ductal carcinoma.
Yeah, it's the most common type. And at that time, I knew nothing about the cancer world, and unfortunately, I had a really phenomenal surgeon, and I had a really great medical team. It was just coincidence, but I learned later how fortunate I was to have that surgeon. She's an icon. And
do you have a shout out for your surgeon?
Yeah, she passed away recently. She was a mentor. Patricia Dawson. She's amazing. She's been featured in, I believe, a documentary coming out talks about her and her work.
That's
so
awesome.
Yeah, for at length. That's still kind of fresh, but I chose to, when I had bilateral mastectomy, I chose to not have reconstruction. I didn't know anybody else in the cancer world. I didn't know that was not an easy choice for people. I didn't know that surgeons wouldn't allow it. For me, it was just, my doctor honored that, and there was no question about it. And I got a really fantastic result. Like later, I learned that wasn't common, and that ended up stoking really active advocacy. What else can I tell you about beginning stuff? I mean, oh, I can't hear you. Your volume's gone. I can't hear
My
you.
dog started going ape shit, and then I like, yeah, your results are uncommonly good, and you didn't scar a whole lot either. So it's such a natural look for what you chose to do later on in your life. And
Yeah.
and I know now, so, like you said, since seeing like other people, how uncommon it is for you to have those results and to have them done when you did have them done, because most surgeons try and talk you out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
we could go into that.
Oh yeah, that's a talk for another day, people.
Right.
So did that make you, like, when you were diagnosed so young, did that make you think about like losing your life, or did it never really occur to you?
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, I guess start with this. It's like I've been trying to get back into that mindset, because I've learned since then, but I had no information. I didn't have any peers to talk to. I didn't know, I started going to a support group at Gilda's Club, which was really helpful. But there were all these barriers, like my age. I mean, I couldn't even get the first mammogram that I ever had. I had to pay for out of pocket, because I was too young to get any of the scholarships, grants for that stuff. I just was so lost, and that's all I could say, was just sitting in that lost feeling. And especially that, being diagnosed August 24th, not having surgery until October 3rd, and they wanted to operate right away, but I didn't have health insurance even. So it was trying to absorb all that information and emotional processing. And yeah, I mean, I definitely was afraid of dying. And I think that fear manifested in some strange ways, because as with a lot of patients, all I could think about was the people around me and their fears of it. I have a really big family, and I was trying to manage everyone else's fears.
Right.
It took me a really long time to actually process my own shit. And, but I'm guessing maybe you can relate to that too, with your family. It's just, you're thinking about everyone else. So
I still don't even think I've gotten, like, someone had in a group was talking about, like, have you processed losing so many people in your life? Honestly, I haven't. They all happen so often. And I had, like, my best friend and my mom, like, within a month of each other, like last year. how do you process that kind of stuff?
Yeah.
Like one person takes like a lifetime to like,
Yeah.
and then, you know, I took out the folder that I think you've famously seen for the calendar, where I have like the waiver and the cards that you sign. And then like, a couple people on the cover are gone. Like 3 of the people on the cover is gone. And how you don't get time. And one of them we photographed, and like she was gone before it even came out. And so no one even knew she was metastatic. And so like you don't have time to process any of that. It's just kind of, and then it comes out like in other ways, I think, let alone your own mortality. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and that comes, I mean, I'm skipping ahead, but it connects. I mean, for you, part of your processing is, you know, the work that you do, you know, your nonprofit, the calendar, all of that, what you do for individuals behind the scenes that people have no idea about. I just have a
Yeah.
tiny glimpse into. I mean, but you know, and for me, well, I'll share a little story because this is something I didn't have not really talked about, and I forget now that I've been remembering.
Right.
It's bizarre that I could forget, but um, you know, within like you know a year and a half after initial diagnosis, within 2 years, I was seeing a new oncologist, and I was having a lot of worrisome symptoms. So I had finished all the initial treatment and healed from surgery and all that, but was doing regular follow-ups. And there were some spots in my abdomen. And I'll just start by saying, of course, I never saw this oncologist again, but this was also the time that I was starting to do my online work, and it was just skyrocketing. And so I had this appointment, and the oncologist, who should never have said anything like this, said, "Yeah, that looks like, you know, cancer. That looks like recurrence." Or I don't know if she said metastasis, but she said like, "Yeah, that looks like cancer." And you know, I think, you know, what you and I know, and maybe a lot of other people don't, is that you know, it's very common to have it metastasize somewhere else. And
Yeah.
when someone has, you know, cancer in your abdomen, in your reproductive organs, it's very hard to tell what's going on. Often they don't know what's going on until their surgery.
Yep.
So I was at the beginning of doing this life-changing advocacy work. It's a good thing you're behind the camera. But and this doctor said, "Well, that looks like cancer." And all I thought to myself is, I'm not going through treatment again. I'm not gonna deal with this. I'm just gonna live my life like I'm gonna die and leave a legacy. That's all I could think of.
And I
And so,
completely understand that.
yeah, I didn't tell anyone. I just jumped into what I
Yep.
was doing. And so that was how I processed it, by not processing it. I didn't go and get imaging. I didn't do anything. I started traveling, and that's when I went on basically like a 3-month trip of just doing every metastatic conference I could, speaking gig, every engagement, meeting everyone in that world that I could, thinking that was my last hurrah. So yeah, we process sometimes by not processing, but
Completely. So like, how would you live your life if you knew you were going to die? Like, uh,
yeah,
it ain't like that song, you know, live like you're dying. Like the my best friend that I lost last year, she lived like she was dying for like 2 years after she was diagnosed metastatic. And
hmm
that's ugly. And it's in fear. And you don't go anywhere. And all you go to is your doctor's appointments. You don't try and work. And you know, obviously you can't get disability because they never think you're sick enough to get disability, and to live like you're dying is um miserable. And it's a misnomer, and he needs to redo that song, because if you really think you're dying, you don't do any of that stuff. You completely shut down, because you're like, what about my family? And what am I about, you know, what am I going to do? And I don't want to die. And you just completely shut down. Like what you're saying is, you live like you forget like you're dying. And then you're just like, it's like you're outrunning a bull, kind of.
yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say. I mean, I feel like that it was very different for me in that. I mean, it was productive. I did a lot that I believed in, but I sabotaged my life in ways, you know. I put everything that I could into the work that I was doing. So I wasn't leaving space for the life that I was leaving behind. I wasn't setting down roots. I wasn't, every penny that I had went into this. Like I sold everything that I had of value so I could travel. So it was like I also was destroying having a life to come back to.
Yeah.
I wasn't maintaining friendships that were outside of that movement. I wasn't, I wasn't taking care of myself. So
Yeah.
I just thought I'm going to use, every resource that I have is going to be finite. I'm going to use it to its full potential. So I was just running, constantly sprinting at
And then
everything.
what did that turn out to be?
So when I came back months later, I had, it ended up just being really large fibroadenomas in my inside and outside my uterus. So it was not even cancer. Like I went into the surgery thinking like, okay, I'm not coming out. Or I'm gonna come out and they're gonna have taken out a whole lot of me. My life's never gonna be the same. And my life never was the same. That was an incredibly hard surgery, but it wasn't cancer. And so, can I swear? Because like fuck that first oncologist, because no one should ever say something like that. Like
Um,
no oncologist should ever say that looks like cancer. Like that
no one, no
offhand.
one should say anything like that. I had
Yeah.
I went in during chemo because my oncologist didn't think my tumor was shrinking, which it never shrunk, by the way. And they're doing an ultrasound, and the tech like looks really worried and says to herself, you couldn't have gotten, your cancer couldn't have grown while you were on chemo.
Yeah, it can.
And then she goes, and she thinks she didn't say it out loud, and then goes and gets like, I'm gonna go get my supervisor.
Yeah.
And I go, okay. And then like the supervisor comes in and puts her hands on my hand and goes, sweetheart. And I go, right? Because like, so then I'm like, is it not? Is it? And so I call my doctor, and he says they're looking at, because it was before mastectomy, and they're looking at fibristic tissue. They don't know how to read fibristic tissue.
Mhm.
So they're just looking at what all looks like tumors and assuming that it's that, that it was bigger than it was, or like you said, it could have been because the chemo didn't do anything. So it could have been growing.
Mhm.
And I don't think you should say it out loud. Just
Yeah.
like your oncologist should have never said, well, it could be more cancer. Like
Yeah.
you should just go, oh, well, we should
We could go do
do an
imaging.
exploratory surgery and find out
That
what's
looks like
going
cancer.
on.
Like,
Right.
I'm like, I'm not dealing with this. I don't have time. Yeah.
Yeah.
But then, the other element of when you're so young, they don't know. Like, there's so much that's unknown. But when you're younger, there's, even more. I was told pretty explicitly, like, the drugs I was given, the poisons I was given in chemo were not designed for someone my age. So median age of diagnosis is 61. There I was 31.
Yep.
They're like, these aren't designed for people who are going to live decades. This is going to wreak havoc on your body in ways we don't know.
Oh, at
And
least they gave you the precursor. I don't know if I would have been better with the precursor.
I mean, I appreciated it. I appreciate that. I want candor, but it's yeah.
Yeah, because also the odds of like recurrence. So like when somebody gets it at 61, the odds of recurrence are still there, but they've already gone through so much of their life. The odds of recurrence for somebody that's younger is so
Right.
much higher. So part of what they do and don't tell you is like the bare minimum. So like I never knew that like it could become metastatic. So like all of
Right.
this like
Right.
save the boobies and like all of this like swag that's put out, no one ever mentions that you like die from it, although it's like an assumption, it can't just be about boobs, because then like why would it be such a big deal? But no one ever talks about like the percentage of recurrence and the percentage of recurrence in younger people that get it. or the odds of it coming back as something else
Yeah.
or in something else when you're younger. And
Yeah.
it's just like it scares the shit out of you, but at the same time, it's like a huge reality. Like I'd rather have it be like your doctor who told you ahead of time, yo, heads up, this isn't meant for somebody your age. And it's gonna be horrible, but it's protocol for the life-saving procedure.
I mean, I think it all comes back to patients not having choice and autonomy. And I know we're a little off topic, but it can't be said too much that like we deserve to have this knowledge because we deserve to have choices. Like we
Yep.
can't have autonomy without choices.
Right.
And I think that's what's not given to people, you know, that it's just given to you as course of action. Like you have this disease, this is what we're going to do, as opposed to this is what's course of action, this is what we recommend. Because it's generally
recommend,
yeah,
like
other
say
medical things,
recommend
it's a
instead of
recommendation. Yes, there's
have
no
to.
there. I mean, I've never experienced that personally or with anyone else where they just tell you what you're going to do without, I mean, any surgery that they're like, you are signing away, you're choosing to do this. It's like, no, you just are pushed into
I
it.
mean, even when you go to the dentist, they ask like what color you want your cap to be. Do you want it to be enamel? Do you want it to be metal? Like they don't just like,
Yeah.
this is what you get. Like you
Yeah.
have no choice. So
Yeah. But yeah, and nobody's, I mean, nobody who was told about metastases, like if they are, you know, diagnosed early, no one is that. I learned that from other patients.
I did
But
too.
then because I learned and it was so shocking to me, that's part of why I was like, I'm giving my life to this. I'm
Yeah,
putting all my energy into
same,
advocating, you know?
same.
So
Yeah,
you're right. And I don't know. I was thinking about, I had a lot of caffeine. I should stop talking for a minute.
that's okay. We could go on for hours, by the way.
I know.
We
So
did like earlier this week.
I know.
Um,
Thank you. We got a lot of that out. Thank you.
let's see.
We wanted to come back to death topics and
Yeah. How has, you know, since that thing happened and you thought you were going to die and then you lived like full throttle for a while and then you had the surgery and then you realized it wasn't quite as severe as
right.
how's that affected like because you've had several near like like near devastating and then you're currently dealing with a real devastating like prognosis. Like is this one like a well we'll see.
And this prognosis now, I mean,
Yeah,
let's see. I had a really
because I know you had something with your spine a while ago.
right, that's ongoing. I had a really, I mean, on New Year's Eve, I had, you know, definitely a near-death experience, which I can go into. But as a result of that, they found a mass in my brain. And so living in fear with that, as I've been living in fear this entire year. This year has been terrifying. You know, I always say the hardest time is, you know, between diagnosis and treatment, because you don't know what things are going to look like, you don't know how bad things are going to be. But I'm like, I've been living in that space for almost 11 months. So
Right, because they're not in a hurry to do anything about it.
right, it's wait and see how it's growing. And there are so many elements to it, but I've not been getting adequate medical care. And I guess that's, you know, I talk about something called cancer privilege, which offends a lot of people, but
Go
it
for it.
deserves
The
some
open space.
now. I mean, cancer holds this powerful feeling. There's no other disease that you can name that's going to pack a punch like when you say cancer. And
Not
in a
anyone that anybody knows.
right, you say cancer and everyone's like, oh my gosh, first of all, they know what that means to some degree. It's, you know, and they understand it and they have immediate sympathy for it or compassion if they're capable. It's like there's this immediate pull towards it. Like whereas with other diseases, you know, people may not even know how to pronounce it. People may not know what it means. And there aren't centers set up just for that. There are plenty of diseases that are as deadly or more painful or this and
Yeah,
that as compared to cancer, but they don't get the kind of attention that
right.
cancer does. That doesn't mean that cancer is easier, but there are elements of it that are easier. Like I
Yeah,
have a tumor in my brain and I can't get medical care for it. If it was cancer, shit would be happening,
yeah,
Um, but and I've learned this from other people, like having a disease that people don't know the name of is a lot more difficult. In my spine disease is degenerative, and it's um yeah, where do I even start with that? But it's called Tarlov cyst disease. So people don't even know that name. Like when I started learning about it, I'm like, well, subarachnoid tissue. And I was like, I didn't even know I had arachnoid tissue, let alone subarachnoid tissue. There's so
I'm
much
like,
to
you're part spider.
yeah, under spider. That's a whole good story. But yeah, I mean, not having a disease that people know the name of is difficult, because then trying to get compassion for it, that's another barrier to
Oh, it's
that.
completely belittled because they don't know what it is.
Yeah.
Whereas
Well,
cancer,
at
it's
least I
kind of
think they
like someone hands you a bomb
yeah.
and then people can see that you have this bomb inside of you. Whereas like what you have going on, that people are like, is it like acne? You know,
Yeah, right. But sorry, I was gonna make another point. I kind of forgot it. I mean, and the other, I think that,
subarachnoid tissue. There you
yeah,
go. Okay.
cancer is so misunderstood. I mean, it's just the most basic element is it's tissue that's growing way too fast and overtaking other tissue, right? So, but half of all Americans are going to have some type of cancer in their lifetime. So
Yeah.
that's a huge number. So it's important that we're paying attention to it, but it's important that we're paying the right amount of attention, because it's like, my mom has basal cell carcinoma. That's highly treatable. Of course, if she wasn't getting regular treatment, she gets things removed like every 6 months. Sorry, mom, if I'm sharing too much, but it's treatable. So
Yeah.
if it doesn't get out of control, she's probably not going to die from that,
Yeah.
for example. And so there are a lot of types of cancer that are curative, whereas breast cancer is not.
Right. And then there's like rare.
Yeah, and then there's a whole lot in between. Yeah.
um,
But,
what would you like people to know about your life?
phew, I mean, that's a really tricky question. I know you asked me this before, and it's um
What I can say is a mystery within an enigma, within an encapsulation of a very um, beautiful human being that just wants to be loved and appreciated. Oh, I go off screen and cry.
all. Because we're talking about cancer, I'm thinking about advocacy and all of that. And I quit doing advocacy the way that I was. I mean, there was a time, as I said, where that was all that my life was about. And then my body quit, and other diseases came to the forefront, and that shifted. I mean, there was a really beautiful time in my life in a way, because I felt like I had found my purpose in life. I
Right.
felt like this is what I was doing. I knew what I was born to do. That's how it felt. And
Completely.
and I mean, there are beautiful and ugly aspects to that. Like I said, it's like I ran my body into the ground, and that's not great, but I felt such purpose. I could speak to anyone and just like have this light. But um but I lost that, And so in a way, it's like I'm trying to figure out now where to restart, because
Right.
it's like having had that sense of purpose was so amazing. Now I'm trying to figure out how to live without that. And I think when I went like into the belly of the beast of the advocacy world, and there's a lot of ugliness there.
Oh,
And
completely.
trying to, when I quit, part of it was like, well, I'm not going to keep contributing to, I mean, the racism that I saw and the racial bias that I saw specifically in the advocacy community was really painful for me. So I didn't want to continue with that work, and because I felt like I was perpetuating this.
Right.
And I'm still trying to dismantle that. I'm still trying to figure out like my own role in that. So I think, not like I want to say like the most important thing about me, but I made a lot of mistakes. I made a lot of mistakes that I didn't understand at the time. And whether I did them unknowingly or not, I still made them.
Yeah.
And it caused a lot of damage that again, it wasn't my intention, but it happened. And I feel like I'm still in this very reflective space of I mean, I'm still like looking back on situations and seeing them differently. And in this past year, through a couple of, you know, near-death experiences, I've experienced like a lot of of privilege, especially for being white. And it's like, I guess the thing is, I feel like I've had a lot of different lifetimes in one life, and I'm still
Yeah.
having new lifetimes. But the thing that I'm trying to figure out is how to not use my privilege, not how to not abuse my privilege, how to be aware of it, and how to call out those systems of oppression.
Right. And that's, I'm trying to do that too. How do I, as an ally,
Yeah.
be the best possible ally that I can? Because you and I have this privilege that
Mhm.
other people don't and aren't respected for, just because of however their other
Right.
is. And how do I correctly represent other people and speak for other people who won't be heard because of what's going, you know, what they were born as,
Mhm.
and or how they choose to live their life. And I don't want to be part of the, you know, grand patriarchy of advocacy. And I don't want to be seen like that. I want to be seen as like the one in the, like the trenches. I still want to get arrested in a protest. Like, I just want to so bad. It's like on my bucket list. And I want to be down there with the people who don't, definitely don't look like me, and don't, you know, present the way I do, because I've always felt like I was shit on, and um didn't really realize the privilege that I do have, and the platform that I can use that for. That's why I'm always talking about like disabilities and people of color, and trans people, and gay rights, because it's not just I have a platform, it's a little one, but um, all of these things are part of like who we are and who I want to represent. And I don't want anybody thinking it's okay to shit on somebody that's disabled. Like, we're disabled. That's my community. Like, we are disabled, and we might not look like it. And that's probably the worst kind of disabled, because people just assume that you're not, and that you're all right. And you know, I don't have that blue card. I don't know if it's blue in every state, but California's disability
Oh, I
card.
have the parking placard.
Yeah.
Sometimes people yell at me for using it.
Yeah. Yeah. I go, you want to see my x-ray?
Right. Yeah. I
Um,
mean,
but I think we both have that we want to, you two are all about like, what about this guy? Right. But we've been to advocacy events, and my friend, we were sitting at the table, and she goes, do you notice how many Hispanic people are here? And I didn't have to look. I go, 4. She goes, you know how many Asian people are here? 2. You know how many Black people are here? 12. And then there's hundreds of people at this event, hundreds. And I don't even have to look. I can say from memory how many of each is here. And that's not an equally represented table. And that's not cool in any way, shape, or form. So I want the table to be equally available to everyone, because everyone deserves to eat at the same table. Off on a tangent.
I mean, I don't think it's tangential. There's just a lot of elements in that it's like, you know, there's so much in that that could be taken apart. And it's like, well, maybe people don't all want to eat at the same table. But I'm thinking of, you know, a lot of my critique is about, you know, the advocacy and that industrial complex. And obviously, I think the medical world needs to change. There needs to be shift in the medical world. But and I found this in breast cancer especially, well, in a lot of actually rare disease, like the knowledge that we get is from other patients. And so community building is so crucial to it's like you don't know what to ask for in the medical world unless you get that information from your medical community.
Right.
And it's really beautiful that these communities form, but we should be getting that from medical community, that's not going to change. So like I feel like we use what we have, right? So maybe your best energy isn't spent down in the trenches. Maybe your best energy is spent exactly what you're doing, like talking with people and creating this platform, right? And there's so much power in this community building, but I mean, but we've talked about this, like cultural capital and cult of personality, and the ways that these groups and communities are very divided and very divisive, and just reproduce the same kind of privilege and bigotry that we're seeing everywhere
And
else.
content.
Yeah, like I'm like that's
Yeah.
where I want to like that's I mean we need a critique of advocacy. That's and there that exists to some degree, but
Yeah.
I'm obviously much more aware of it in some areas. I'm like,
Right.
where's the critique of breast cancer advocacy?
And
Because
you were really like pivotal in like opening my eyes to a lot of that. And I already set out to want it to be inclusive, and then you go, yeah, but what about this? And I go, I didn't think about that. Right. So if it's like you were saying, if it's not something that you're familiar with,
mhm,
like I recently found out that there's a lack of images of predetermining factors like skin lesions and stuff like that, that would be like a predetermining factor for breast cancer in any people of color. So like the medical journals
yeah,
are white people. And then and it's not just like outside the United States, it's United States too. And that's like really stupid because it's going to present different on different people. So we all need to know what, and we all need to share images of what that looks like and that kind of thing. And I just was like, what do you mean? Like, again, something I had no clue, because it's not in my within my blinders,
well, the issue is that, let's see, a major issue, I should never say the issue, but white people are seen as the norm. That's it. So, I mean, to start with, like the term inclusive, I find problematic because it's like we've already perceived what the norm is and what that's comprised of, and anything else, we're going to let you in, but you're not part of the core, right? So when you think of inclusivity, it's like tolerance, another problematic term.
Right.
But in all these ways, it's like, white people of, when you think of, I think a good comparison is accents. I mean, my accent switches a lot because of my background, but generally the accent that I have, people see as not an accent, right? Because
Oh,
it's the
same.
white American accent. And so people are like, well, that person has an accent. It's like, no, we all have an accent. We've
Right.
just decided that this white way of speaking is the norm.
Yeah.
Like we point out and we notice difference, but it's all different from each other.
Yeah. There's no such thing as homogeny. Like we're every single one of us is, a walking defect of some kind.
Mhm.
And there is no normal at all.
And we have average, but if
Yeah.
we're just speaking to averages, then absolutely, we're not including that. Average is completely omitted. Like it's not, we're way over in the white like
Yeah.
element. And and I
Um,
guess, I speak to the, advocacy, but it's like that is such a great microcosm of what we see in the rest of the world,
yeah. Yeah. So just so you know, what exists outside the world, it exists within the advocacy world. And we need more people that don't look like us.
Mhm. Right. And then, I remember, sorry,
Oh, go ahead.
working within these groups, like definitely there were some people who had an awareness of it, but by and large, their way of shifting that was very tokenizing. Like we're intentionally going to pull this person in,
One.
have her,
One.
this one person, instead of, and it's like and then the person that they would pull in, that would be a person because they felt safe and comfortable with them, who wouldn't challenge them, as opposed to somebody who really like represented that
Right.
community, for example.
Right.
It's like, as opposed to somebody who was like very active in the Latinx,
Right.
community,
Right.
who was going to come in and be vocal about, anti-Black racism. They
Yeah.
wouldn't pick that person. So then the people
Yeah.
who did get tokenized and brought into these things to be inclusive were the ones who could, kind
Pass.
of act white in a
Yeah.
sense and
Pass.
assimilate in a sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, how do you hope to live your life going forward from here? Um, and then the very last question is, what's your dream funeral?
Oh yeah, how do I want to live my life is a really hard question because I
Yeah.
don't know yet. I'm in a definitely in a space of, I feel like I've just been starting a new life. Um, and I don't know exactly how that should look, but and you did ask me these questions ahead of time, so I should have been thinking of them, but um that's not where my tangents went,
I'm better spitballing
I
than
will
thinking
say,
about it.
I love, I in our conversation the other day, you reminded me about death doulas and that need. And that was something I was really compelled to do. And I do feel like I have certain talents and certain energies that aren't being utilized well. And so I guess if it comes down to it, I want to be able to use those talents well. I don't want to be able to use my privilege well, but not in a way that's taking advantage, but that's actually helping. Because ultimately I want to help people. Like, I find value in being in helping people in a variety of ways. And I've been doing that still behind the scenes, but I want to get back to using that in a larger way. And I've had a number of experiences with people who are dying or died, and it's just such a privileged and beautiful space. And this notion of death doulas, or by any other name, people who are helping, assisting people near end of life, and just like, we can make that a beautiful experience. It's
Right.
another transition, regardless of what your belief system is. We can see that that is a transition of life into something different, and we can like bring honor and beauty to that, and create space for people to feel seen in that, instead of you know that, instead of being towards the end of life and seeing that as an ugly thing. And
Almost
people are
cowardice. Yeah.
cowardice, like people are afraid of being in
Yeah.
that space. It's like almost like it's contagious.
Right. And
And
they a lot of times they'll say they gave up their fight.
they gave up their fight. All the
And I was
language.
like, no, no.
I'd like to
No.
draw a lot of awareness to that. And I'd like to like erase some of that stigma and create space for people to feel comfortable, not just comfortable, but honored
Well,
as they.
in
Yeah.
our community, it is very much needed. And that's what I hope to do with like what we're doing today, is because it is such a reality. And it's not morbid, and death is a chrysalis to another way, another form, another way of being. And you know, you shouldn't be ashamed of that. I mean, honestly, I haven't found any vampires yet to like make me immortal. So, and none of you are going to either. If you do, but it's really not realistic. And we're all going to die, and we might as well live our life the way we want to in that lifetime. And cancer does a lot for us in regards to figuring out what is and what isn't a priority. And I think just being aware and understanding that it is going to end, and you might as well, stop putting up with his shit now, like, because, or whatever it is, stop, because it's no way to live like that, and it's no way to die, certainly. But I think that's a great, that would be a great next step for you, because you're not afraid of it.
Yeah. I mean, even that question of how do you want to live is like, there's a lot of privilege in being able to question that, it's like, I used to say, I don't know, it became like this phrase amongst a group of friends. Let's say there's got to be more to life than just surviving, because it's like, well, we've gotten past initial treatment and here we are, but we still are living with all the side effects and things from this disease, mentally, emotionally, everything, or physically. But there's got to be more than just surviving. And now I'm realizing, like, actually surviving is a lot. So
Yeah.
now I start saying, like, well, I have 100% survival rate. When I'm having a really hard time, I'm like, but I have 100% survival rate. And that's a huge thing. So this question of what do I want to do with my life? How do I want to live my life? Like, there's a lot of privilege in just being able to think about that, because if my time and energy isn't 100% focused on just surviving, that's saying a lot.
And
So
I want you to think about like how much shit that you've been through already that could have possibly killed you.
yeah,
Like it sounds morbid, I know, but think about like, I think I told you the other day that my dad's like, oh, you want to hear about the first time your brother tried to kill you? And I was like, oh, somebody's been trying to kill me that long? Like stuff's been trying to kill you and I
yeah, for a long
forever, forever. And
yeah,
and we know it. Like it's different to acknowledge or to ignore it, but you acknowledge like, yeah, that could have killed me. Yeah, I could have bled out on the table. Yeah, and I still came back and you had that car accident that could have, and it didn't. So what are you here for? You're here for whatever particular, whatever floats your boat right now.
yeah,
And that's what you're here for. And so many people like spin their wheels. Well, I don't know. Well, what really lights a fire under your ass? That's
yeah,
it. Quit floundering. That's it. Put your rudder in that direction and forget about all the other stuff.
yeah. I mean, yeah, you're right. You and I think both have so many stories that would seem unbelievable, just to sit them out and write them out. So
I know you told me that there was a or some like unbelievable like story of someone that had passed that you had talked about. I think that would be beautiful
yeah,
to share.
yeah. I mean, um, I'll try to um try and a little bit, but this one, I'm not a religious person by any means. I don't believe anything resembling like theism is not up my alley. I don't believe in a higher power, but things happen that I can't explain. And this, um, there was a person I was close with, and she was near the end of the life. She had uh, metastatic breast cancer, and she was near the end of life. And I'd been going to see her really often. And sorry, it's kind of hard to talk about, but I arrived at her house one day, and her older mom was there, and her husband, and she was in the shower, sitting in a chair in the shower, and she shouldn't have been in there. She was too weak to be in there, and they couldn't get her out. She didn't have the strength to stand up. She couldn't get out. And I'm telling this longer than probably it seems like it needs to be, but so I was trying to help just that. And at one point I just, she's bald and she's naked, and it was such a vulnerable place, and she could hardly, and so I just got in the shower with her and like took off my shirt and held her like to my body, because it was like an infant, just someone at this stage. And then because of everything that was happening, because she couldn't really think straight, and like she was like, she died within a few days, but um she didn't understand what was happening, and while they were trying to get her out of the shower, it seemed like they were trying to hurt her, and she became like terrified of them, even though they were like her loved ones. So she was terrified, just in this shaking space. So we finally got her out of the shower. She's sitting in a chair in the living room, and she's looking around at everyone else like they were trying to get her. Like she really was fearful and completely irrational. And but she trusted me in that space. And so I went and I just knelt by her chair, and she started talking about things, and she would whisper things to me she didn't want anyone else to hear, which is also painful because these are her loved ones, and she, whatever, I'm just gonna let go of that judgment. But it's not a judgment. I'm afraid of them feeling judged. But
No, but
so
it is more like people that are dying. will give a stranger or
Yeah.
someone that's not their family, they'll give them more raw realness than because they don't want to hurt their loved one's feelings. So they're more realistic with somebody they have less ties to.
Yeah.
I've experienced that too.
Yeah. So I would go and kneel right by her chair, so she would whisper in my ear, and then she was seeing things that, you know, I couldn't see, no one else could see, and she was talking to people who weren't there as far as I could see, and she was terrified, and it was like, it was as though someone was telling her to go with them, and she was crying and she was screaming and she didn't want to go, and she was saying these names, and you know, later I asked them, they were relatives of hers that who had died. So I'm in this position of not knowing what's going on, but just wanting to calm her. And she was whispering to me about what they were saying to her. And she was saying she was going to die and she didn't want to die. And I didn't really know anything in this moment. It's just like in this moment where you're caught up and all you know is that right there. And I just looked at her with such strong conviction, and I said her name, and I said, you know, I was whispering, but like looking right in the eyes. I was like, you can't die yet. Don't worry, you're not gonna die yet. You're not gonna go with them right now. And she kept saying, why? And I said, because it takes 3 days. It takes 3 days. It's not gonna happen right now. It takes 3 days for this to happen. So you're not gonna die right now. And she was, you know, it was like a back and forth of questioning me, and I was just looking at her. I'm like, I was so sure, like, believe me, you're okay, like you're right here with me, you're gonna be here, it's okay. And then it was like a fever breaking, and that kind of passed, and she calmed down, I went to sleep. And then you know, so I kept going to see her. I saw her 3 days later, and I kind of had forgotten about that detail. I just said whatever I needed to say in that moment to make her okay, right? um and so I remember, like, she was in, you know, then her bed, and she called me over and whispered to me. She's like, "So what happens in 3 days? What's going, like, what's the next step?" And I felt so awful because I was like,
Yeah.
you know,
Now
she's
what?
like, I just said that in that moment, and I was like, you weren't okay, and you needed to be here. So I'm sorry, but she looked at
Yeah.
me with such disappointment and like upset, but
Sorry I led you on.
yeah, but I absolutely needed, I said what I needed to keep her there for those 3 days, and she felt like I had this secret to the afterworld, and I really did. Like, I had this secret to keep her safe in that moment, and that's the best. But like, what
So
happens after
funny.
3 days? I'm like, I'm sorry,
That's so funny.
I lied to keep you alive.
Yeah.
I don't even know why. I
I
just,
thought you were gonna say in 3 days she's like took it like a contract.
no, she didn't. No, she didn't. And really, they were trying to keep her alive for long enough for her best friend to come to town, which
Yeah.
she did. But that
Yeah.
was maybe 5 days later.
Yeah.
So no, it was like she was disappointed.
That's really
But
funny.
I mean, yeah. So
My husband's aunt was sick of it and was over it. And she had metastatic cancer and was like, when's the Lord gonna take me already? She was always impatient. I'm sick of it. I'm like, even in death, she's impatient. It's so
yeah,
funny. You have to find some kind of like humor in it because
yeah,
um, the things that they'll say are just completely comical.
yeah.
I
I
love
mean,
that
so
story.
many.
Thank you.
What's been 3? What happens in 3 days? I'm like,
Yeah.
like, what do I say now?
Do I have like, do I, you know, is horns going to sprout out of my head or, you know, they're going to come back?
I mean, I don't remember the details, but it's like it's a process. It takes 3 days because that's how long it takes. It was something like that's how long it takes for them to be ready for you to join them.
I was thinking you were getting some like interstellar communications that were like,
Who knows? Maybe because I don't know where I came up with that shit. Like, I don't know why I said that. I don't know where it came from. I just knew that she was terrified, and it seemed like it felt like she was, like, her body was trying to die, and I knew that she absolutely was not ready. She was terrified, and I didn't want her to go in that state. You know,
yeah,
I didn't want her to die in fear like that. It was,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
so yeah, no,
Well, Vaughn and I are not done. I mean, we're done for today, but we are not done talking. There's
no,
so much that we would like to share, and there's so much we want to put out there that we need to create some other like program.
Yeah.
like the, Vonn and me, or what it's called. But we're going to develop something, and tea will be spilled, truth will come out, and there's just so much that needs to be said and learned, and that I have to learn from Vonn, and
Vice versa.
then
Like,
that we just need to take it out and smear it all over the place, and we just have to figure out how often we're going to do it, and so on and so forth. But I hope I'm pointing the right way on the video. My co-host, Vonn Jensen, advocate, cancer warrior, trans person, and all around wonderful heart. Thank you so much for visiting today, and I will speak to you soon.
yeah, this is very needed, this Death Diner, this platform. So let's keep doing it. Thank you so much for having
You're
me.
welcome. Bye.
Love you.